Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome to session 4 of Product University. Today we have a great one in store. It's another in-depth one. So, last week we went all in on skin physiology. Today it's hair physiology. So without further ado, let me share my screen. All right, so today we are looking at hair physiology and Riman. Not only are we looking at the structure of our hair, but what the Riman products are doing for both the hair and the scalp and ultimately hair health. So just looking at our hair at a glance first. So humans actually have approximately 5 million hair follicles on our entire body. Of course, we have areas void of hair, so that's going to be like your palms of your hands, the soles of your feet. But of these 5 million hair follicles, 100,000 roughly are on your head. So other than cosmetic appearance, obviously by dyeing your hair and styling it, hair provides many benefits depending on its location. So you have not only that it offers protection against external elements essentially, and then also thermal regulation as well as UV protection. So the hair specifically on your scalp actually provides some UV protection. So when we're kind of appreciating hair, of course, it has that aesthetic component to it, but it actually does have a huge purpose on our body. And so if the hair growth and follicle structure are unbalanced, there actually can be a significant impact on your overall perceived hair health, not only in the aesthetic appearance of it, but its functionality as well. All right, so now we understand the hair at a glance. Let's look at the hair in depth. So here is a picture of the hair follicle. And so the hair follicle itself is located within the dermis and is considered the living part of your hair. So what's really interesting, and if you remember from our discussion last week on the 3 different layers of our skin, we have the epidermis at the top, the dermis in the middle, and then that hypodermis at the bottom. We essentially have this hair follicle located in the dermis, but it actually originates in the epidermis. So if you can see here, the epidermal cells essentially curve in towards the hair shaft. And so there is some epidermal component to the surrounding hair follicle. And so the hair follicle in its entirety is considered to be part of the pilosebaceous unit, which is a super fancy name you do not need to remember, but essentially it is referring to not only the hair follicle, but the sebaceous gland that neighbors it and the erector pili muscle. So the hair follicle, of course, is where the hair is growing. That sebaceous gland creates sebum, which is that natural oil that we often have on our face and through our pores. But in this instance, it is providing some lubricity to the hair follicle. And then really cool, I think, is the erector pili muscle. So this muscle actually is what contracts and causes your hair to stand up, especially if you have goosebumps or if you're cold. So that's what's essentially happening when your body's perceiving either nerve impulses or thermoregulation in terms of that cold touch. So when we look at the actual hair follicle itself, we have a couple of really important components to it that allow for the growth of hair. So specifically, if we're looking down here, this is known as the bulb of the hair follicle. So this is where essentially all the growth is really occurring, and it all is essentially about the constant replication and keratization of keratinocytes. So if you remember again from last week's discussion, skin cells are called keratinocytes. And so those same keratinocytes are actually what are growing or creating your hair shaft. But in this instance, they differentiate such that they're tightly packed together to create keratin. So your hair is made of keratin, but originated as keratinocytes. Beyond the keratinocytes, we also have melanocytes, which are at the bottom of the bulb. So again, if you remember, melanocytes are those cell types that create melanin or pigment. So they do exactly the same thing here, but for our hair in the sense that they are creating the pigment of your hair follicle. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on that when we talk about hair types. And so essentially as the hair grows from the bulb, it is getting all this nutrients from what is known as the dermal papilla. So the dermal papilla is a structure of nerve fibers and of capillaries. And so these essentially allow for nutrients and for oxygen to reach the hair for healthy hair growth. And it also determines the size and the color of the produced strands. So the effectiveness rather of the dermal papilla on your scalp is going to be different from the hair that grows on your eyebrows or your eyelashes, as they are much shorter. Sometimes some are more thick or different colors. So that's why you might, have red hair like me, but I have blonde hair in my body. And that's because there's just different things going on in the bulb of these various hair follicles. All right, so Understanding this is really important because it's the living part of your hair. This is the part that can get nutrients, can be affected in terms of growth of the hair. But when you're looking at the visible part of our hair, that's considered the hair shaft. So this is actually made up of dead skin cells. So they are no longer alive. And so the dead skin cells really are keratin. So this protein that is flexible, strong, and it also kind of gives some elasticity to our hair. And when we're looking at the hair shaft, it has specific three parts to it. And so the first part is going to be the medulla, which is the center of the hair shaft. And so this really actually has no function that scientists can identify. Some hair types actually don't have a medulla at all. So really, it's just appreciated as the marrow of the hair. If you're looking at a bone, obviously there's marrow in the bone. Same thing here, it just exists as kind of the root of the hair. But next, and I would say extremely importantly, is the cortex. So the cortex makes up most of the hair shaft, and it contains a lot of really important bonds and materials that make up the characteristics of your hair. So probably one of the greatest and most important things is that it contains those pigmenting cells. So the outer shaft, which we'll touch on, the cuticle, is actually translucent, but that cortex is what's giving our hair its perceived color. And then the cortex itself has various different bonds within it that are able to be kind of manipulated and regulated, especially if you are styling your hair. So when we are looking at the cortex, we have hydrogen bonds and van der Waals forces, both of which are considered weak bonds. And so these weak bonds can essentially be broken and reformed every single day without hurting the structural integrity of your hair. So examples of breaking and reforming hydrogen bonds would be simply by wetting your hair. The water actually gets into the cortex, it breaks apart certain hydrogen bonds. That's why your hair feels a little bit more elastic when it's wet. It looks a little different. It's all because that water coming in. Similarly, if you're straightening your hair or curling it, you are breaking hydrogen bonds. And that is also why these types of hairstyles are often susceptible to frizz and humidity, because the water easily can interact with those hydrogen bonds as well and break them apart. So kind of reducing your curl pattern or your flat iron pattern. And then most importantly, in terms of bonds in the cortex, is going to be disulfide bonds. So these disulfide bonds are considered strong bonds. And these strong bonds are what you are breaking or essentially manipulating when you bleach or color your hair. So bleach comes in, it breaks up these disulfide bonds. It also removes the pigmenting cells from the cortex. So you have essentially nearly no pigment in the cortex, and then you can deposit a dye particle. And so that gives you whatever hair color you want. But because you were doing this, because you're breaking these strong interactions, that's when people often experience, the side effects of bleaching your hair. So it's going to be brittle or damaged hair or hair that has some cuticle breakage. So in the term of cuticle breakage, let's look at that third component of the hair. So the cuticle is the outermost portion of the hair shaft, and it is essentially composed of tightly packed scales in an overlapping structure, such that you're creating this kind of protective layer for the hair. And so when you're looking at a healthy, undisturbed cuticle layer, they're all going to be tightly packed such that water cannot get in, UV damage cannot get in, and then obviously just outside pollution or particles cannot enter the cortex. But once you bring in essentially dyeing or things of that nature, you have to open up the cuticle for the dye products to enter the cortex. And in doing so, you have some irreparable damage to the cuticles, which is okay. You can often find and kind of realign those cuticles with conditioners and with conditioning treatments, but that isn't always the case depending on how often you bleach your hair. So when you do have damaged hair, this is really what we're looking at, which is that right picture there where the cuticles are kind of open, allowing for entrance of various, I guess, things in terms of water and pollution, things of that nature into the cortex. So the hair shaft is the dead part, hair follicle, living part. Now let's look at the hair cycle. So the hair growth cycle is extremely important, although the scalp hair only grows less than 0.5 millimeter a day. So very small noticeable changes in the length of your hair, but of course over time, that's when you see more sustainable growth patterns. So firstly, let's look at anagen. And firstly, I might mention that there are 3 growth layers, or growth stages rather, that your hair can be in at any given time. And so anagen is the active growth phase. So this is where essentially your cells are duplicating, they're replicating, they're creating a new hair follicle. And this can take anywhere from 2 to 6 years. And that's specifically on your head. So again, with those shorter hairs on your body, on your eyelashes, and your eyebrows, that's going to have a shorter anagen phase because they are more often to kind of fall off and quickly grow back. So with our anagen phase, that's you have the active growth and cell production. And next you have the catagen phase. So this is when the growth has stopped and the hair follicle that was initially or was being grown begins to detach from the bulb and kind of starting to make its way out to eventually fall off. And so this only lasts about 1 to 2 weeks in the catagen phase. And at any point in time, only 2% of your scalp hairs are in the catagen phase. And then if we look at the last phase, that's the telogen phase. So the telogen phase is when the hair is fully detached, and essentially we are just prepared for the next anagen phase. So the hair specifically, now that it's fully detached, will either fall out on its own, fall out with brushing or with general manipulation, or the next growing hair that's in anagen phase will actually push it out of the hair follicle. So the telogen phase roughly accounts for about 10 to 15% of any of the hairs in your head are going to be in the telogen phase. And so it's also really interesting to note that hair loss or hair shedding is completely normal. And for a typical individual, they can expect to be losing 100 to 150 hairs a day, and that's healthy. When it's not healthy is when you are losing hair that is still in the anagen phase that is trying to grow. And so that's often insights with various hair loss concerns, as well as alopecia as well. All right, so now we've got the hair growth cycle. Let's look at the types of hair. So there are many different ways to categorize hair types. So not only can you look at curl pattern, but density, color, and just perceived health. You can have damaged hair or healthy hair. And these different hair types are often influenced by a variety of different genetics, hormones, stress, and external factors as well. So it's interesting to see how the hair types are quite fluid. So if we're looking at hair density as a signifier of hair type, we have thick, medium, and fine. So medium is probably the most common type of hair in terms of hair density. And then thick is going to be a little bit more coarse. Per hair, when you're looking at a single piece of hair, it's going to be a little bit more dense. And then lastly, fine is the one that is most susceptible to damage and to breakage as well. If we're looking at hair color as a signifier of hair type, it's really determined by melanin. So again, melanin, that pigmenting molecule, you're either going to have eumelanin, which creates dark brown or black pigment, or pheomelanin, which creates red and blonde pigment. So of course, for me, I have pretty much a richness of pheomelanin in my head. But of course, the other important thing to note is that the different hair types and hair follicles are not uniform on your scalp. So you can have one follicle that's growing darker hair, one follicle that's growing blonde hair. And so that really lends to kind of the interest and intricities of hair types and really looking at someone's hair growth. I would say probably most common in identifying hair types is through the curl pattern. And so there are 4 different types with categories or subcategories under each type. So for type 1, straight hair. Type 2, wavy, 3, curly, and 4, coily. And then of course by there you might have 4A, type 4C hair, especially as we continue to get curlier and curlier. But when we're looking at the different hair types in terms of curl pattern, there's actually a differentiation in the hair follicle as well as the diameter of the hair follicle itself. So with straight hair, the hair follicle essentially protrudes directly up from the skin. And so that allows for the hair to grow kind of in that straight line. And if you were to take a cross section of the hair shaft, you would see that it's nearly perfectly circular. Versus someone with wavy hair, you begin to see a slight angling in the hair follicle, which causes the hair to start taking on a little bit of shape as it grows out of the scalp. And the cross section begins to be more oval. And with curlier hair, it's going to be more curvy of a follicle type. So it's really pronounced in terms of its angularity, really causing the nice curls you get once it finally becomes, part of the hair shaft. And when you take the cross section, it's nearly elliptical. So this really allows a lot of people to start appreciating and understanding when your hair types are coming from and why essentially your hair follicle is so important in understanding your hair type as well. So a huge point to be made about curly, coily hair is that it's the most porous. And what porous is, or porosity, is the hair's ability to absorb and retain moisture. And so your hair at any point in time should have roughly 17 to 34% water in these strands, but having too much water in your hair actually can be damaging to the hair. So if you might have heard, or something I've always heard from my hairstylist is, if your hair is wet, try to comb it from the bottom up and don't yank the comb through, and try not to use a brush. Use a comb, a fine tooth comb, because when you have water in your hair, it essentially increases the elasticity, as I had mentioned. And if you stretch it too far past this elasticity, you can cause breakage to your hair. So really, when you're also considering your hair type, the porosity is an important thing to take to note, just in understanding how to treat it and how to care for it, especially in washing. And then another part in terms of the hair discussion is the scalp itself. So what is the scalp if not an extension of your facial skin? And so it also contains those typical 3 dermal layers, and they can experience the same type of issues as your face in terms of dryness, oiliness, etc. And so there's actually a new trend, and it's a trend that's been around, I would say, for about 2 years or so, called the skinification of the scalp. And so the skinification of anything is simply treating that thing as if you would treat your facial skin, with proprietary ingredients or special active formulas that allow for the utmost health of your scalp in this instance. So we're looking at things that might exfoliate, hydrate, or moisturize the scalp in the hopes of healthier hair growth. And what's also important to note is that it itself boasts a powerful microbiome. So we have a microbiome in our gut, and we have it on our body skin, facial skin. We also have it on our scalp. And this microbiome is essentially as important as the other ones, in the sense that if there is an imbalance, you might essentially experience some issues. So something, for example, is when the specific genus Malassezia furfur, when that one is dominant on your scalp, that is actually the genus that creates dandruff. So dandruff, might always just be because your scalp is extremely dry, or it can be because of a microbiome imbalance of this Malassezia furfur essentially growing and dominating your microbiome. So really interesting to look into your microbiome in your scalp as well, because that can point towards a lot of health concerns with the scalp. All right, so understanding now the hair, the structure of the follicle, the shaft, and of our scalp, let's look at some common hair concerns. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many different concerns. I would say probably one of the biggest ones, of course, is hair loss, hair growth. But in that instance, that again is something that is clinical, that I want to focus more on something that just everyone may experience in their typical day-to-day, that Riman and its ingredients can help. So the first one's going to be dryness. So dryness is simply, the hair follicles aren't either producing that necessary sebum to coat and to provide lubricity to the hair, or essentially you are overwashing your head and you are causing dryness to your head. And this might cause flaking, which is dandruff, which then can also be, of course, caused by microbiome imbalance. Oiliness, which is, the opposite end of the spectrum, is when your hair follicle is producing too much sebum. And this can be for a variety of different reasons, either due to some hormonal regulation, or because you've been overwashing and your body's trying to overcompensate for that stripping of your typical sebum levels by producing too much. So it's a fine balance between deciding, if am I overwashing to actually cause oiliness, or am I overwashing and it's causing dryness? And so that's where you just need to play around with the different products you're using, the amount of times you're washing your hair in a week, etc. And then lastly, and most commonly, cuticle damage. So in cuticle damage, your hair shaft is either entirely missing cuticles. If you'll remember, those cuticles are those fine kind of roof shingles that cover the outside of our hair shaft. So they're either missing the cuticles, or they're not properly aligned. They're kind of pulled back because you maybe just got your hair bleached, or because you have some damaged ends. And this allows for actually a decrease in the hydrophobicity of your hair and generally weakened strands. So this may appear in the form of frizz or easy breakage. So in understanding the common hair concerns, let's see what our Deserticola line has to offer for genuine hair health. And so, of course, the most prominent thing to look at is our Deserticola. So Deserticola is a microalgae that is native to desert biomes, and it was discovered, I think, in like 2004 in the desert by 2 Californian scientists. So in taking various extracts from this microalgae, we found that there was a specific metabolite called loleolide. And so in 2019, Dr. Hee-Sik Kim of the Korea Research Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology actually essentially shared his studies with us at Riman and was able to enhance that metabolite loliolide to 12 times greater of a concentration than traditional resources. And so this is extremely important because not only is this proprietary for us, this is a patented ingredient for us, but loliolide itself is beautiful in its ability to really bring about hair health by starting at the hair follicle. So it is known to essentially interact with thermal cells and within the hair follicle to modify hair growth. So if you can see here, there's actually studies on it that I invite you to look into further in the sense that it is just regulating certain signaling pathways when applied to the scalp. It also poses antioxidative and anti-apoptotic properties. And so anti-apoptotic, apoptosis is actually just cell death. And when cells essentially just think they're about to die, and so they actually just combust spontaneously, for lack of a better word. So in anti-apoptotic properties, you're reducing cell death. So Deserticola is fantastic, and it's really the lifting force behind the 3 products in the Deserticola hair care line. However, there are 2 additional ingredients that we really like to focus on that are in all 3 products outside of just Deserticola, and that first is going to be nettle extract. So nettle extract is a natural extract that we actually grow on Jeju Island and produce at our Ask-based Jeju plant. So this is entirely, again, controlled by Riman in our raw material sourcing. So it contains various vitamins, minerals, amino acids that all really benefit the hair. So we have vitamins A, C, and K, calcium and iron, and essential amino acids. And it also is a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. And so what's really nice about this nettle extract is its ability to not only bring about scalp health and hair follicle health, but also to bring health to the dead part of your hair, to your hair shaft. Your hair shaft and specifically your cortex actually also have trace minerals in there. So you are just replenishing those trace minerals with this nettle extract as well. And then last but not least, our camellia seed oil. So camellia seed oil is another one of those things that we grow ourselves, that we are producing at our Jeju Ask base, again, just to keep intimate with our formulations. And so camellia is actually native to Asia and is rich in palmitic and omega-6 linoleic acids. So these essentially are lipids that are very beneficial to, of course, the scalp skin, but to your hair as well. Your hair has that slight natural hydrophobicity, which means it repels water in a sense. And so those lipids nicely coat the hair to continue that hydrophobicity. But it also acts not only as an anti-inflammatory agent for the scalp, but a moisturizer for both the scalp and strands. At its base, it is an oil, and oil is beautiful at moisturizing. So with the ability to impart all these healthy benefits and fatty acids to the hair and to the scalp, it also improves elasticity and density of hair strands. So no flat hair here. So in understanding the hair care lines, beyond just the ingredients, we also have to appreciate the certifications that back the prowess of this line. So probably the most prominent, of course, that is unique to the entire Bodolab hair care and body care line is the Eve Vegan certificate we have received. So Eve actually stands for Expertise Vegan Europe, and it is an independent organization that essentially assesses vegan claims or both on products or manufacturing entities to make sure that they are actually rigorously following the vegan way of production. So what's really unique about eVegan is how well it's recognized. They're probably one of the most well-recognized certification agencies in this sphere. And what's also amazing is the fact that certification is only valid for a limited period. And so they actually force you to go through various verification processes every cycle to ensure that you're still staying consistent with your promise of promoting a vegan product. So with our status as eVegan, essentially, not only are we still pushing forth that we are cruelty-free, which is true for all products in the Riman offerings, but there are no animal byproducts. So you can love your hair, skin, and the planet. All right, let's get into the products themselves. So first and foremost, of course, we have that cleansing product, which is the Deserticola Shampoo. So this shampoo is so beautiful to gently cleanse the scalp while also nourishing the hair follicles. So of course, with any shampoo, you were trying to cleanse just kind of any daily impurities. So whether that's buildup of products or just of daily experiences, you are able to cleanse that from your scalp and from your hair. but it also is composed of gentle surfactants. And so again, those surfactants are the cleansing molecules that you will find in a hand wash, in a body wash, or of course, in this instance, a Deserticola shampoo. So these gentle surfactants are allowing you to cleanse your scalp without stripping the natural oils. So you don't have to necessarily concern yourself if you typically suffer from a dry scalp. This will not make it drier. So the Deserticola shampoo is a beautiful and gentle way to cleanse the hair. And then to bring back that conditioning, to bring in that hair health, you follow with the water treatment. And as I'm sure those of you who have already used it, it's a very unique formula, but it is meant to be used daily as a conditioner. But, oftentimes people might not be sure how to use it with the fact that it is water thin when you open the bottle, but that's on purpose. We wanted to create kind of a novel way to condition your hair besides all the typical gel creams that you see offered on the market. So the Deserticola water treatment is meant to act as a daily conditioner to fortify the strands and the scalp with camellia seed and with conditioned polymers. This will allow not only for some reparation of damaged cuticles, but also for bringing essentially a healthy shine, whether you're air drying or styling your hair out of the shower. So with its being water thin, once it comes into contact with water, that's when you begin to experience the solidification, the slight creaming up of this formula. And with that, it brings actually a slight sense of warming, which might be nearly perceivable when you're in that hot shower, but it's there. And this really allows for the therapeutic aspect of the water treatment. And what's really cool when you're discussing condition treatments in general is that specific thing I mentioned, those conditioning polymers. So your hair naturally actually has a negative charge to it. And of course, if you are also treating your hair with bleaching or dyeing, this might change the pH in charge of your hair. That's when conditioning polymers become even more important. Conditioning polymers actually hold a positive charge, and so they bind to these negative sites on the hair, and that's what allows for smoothing of the cuticle or for bringing about hair shine. So just a little fun fact for you about conditioning polymers. Last but not least, of course, we have the hair oil serum. So this is a 5-in-1 hair oil serum that not only leaves a finishing shine, but has so many different benefits for genuine hair health. So I've actually listed out the 5-in-1 different things that it imparts to the hair. So of course, first, it is able to provide heat protection up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It also reduces frizz, increases shine, maintains volume, and of course, reinforces damaged cuticles. So this product, of course, has the Deserticola, has the camellia seed oil, but it also has giant byungpul extract, which of course is our hero ingredient. We have to love to see this in this product. So in this instance, that giant byungpul is just really helping to further nourish the strand and repair damage. And then 5 additional botanical oils in this serum not only add to the ability to reduce frizz, but allow for the whole product itself to be very lightweight. So in creating the hair oil serum, we had to be very careful about selecting specific oils that might be heavier than others. And so with the oils we've chosen, this allows for it to be essentially usable throughout the day, even if you're just touching up and you've already applied it in the morning. So with this, you essentially can apply it to air drying hair, fresh out of the shower, or even styled hair, and you still will get that lustrous Deserticola shine. So these are the 3 Deserticola products, hair products in the Bodolab line. Now, of course, I had to give y'all a recap because there was a lot of information today. So I just wanted to go quickly through the different ways that the hair follicle is, so important to our hair health and perceived hair aestheticness, but also, hair and Riman and how we are essentially formulating for the benefit of your hair health. So again, there are 2 main features to your hair strands: the dead part and the living part. So the living part is going to be the hair follicle, and it's going to be located within the dermis, and your cells are constantly differentiating to create new strands, to pack together all that keratin and produce new strands. It's composed of that bulb where it is getting all those nutrients from the capillaries, and it is also essentially what's anchored to the skin. So that bulb is really keeping that hair in there until it's done growing. The dermal papilla, that's going to be all the nutrients. And then, of course, the melanocytes. So that's where we're getting our pigment and our definable hair color. The hair shaft, or the dead part of our hair, is what extends from the scalp. This is the visible portion, and it is composed of tightly packed layers of keratin that provide elasticity and strength to the hair. And of course, the hair shaft has its own 3 characteristic regions. the medulla or the inner portion, the cortex, which is that really important portion containing those pigmenting molecules, as well as those various bonds. And then lastly, the cuticle, which creates that essentially protective layer to the outside of your hair shaft. And then, of course, in appreciating the hair, you also have to appreciate where it grows from, which is your scalp. So this scalp contains the similar layering as does any other skin on your body, and it also boasts a powerful microbiome of beneficial and deleterious bacterial species, depending on your microbiome balance. So in looking at various common issues that you might experience in terms of your hair and perceived hair health, we first looked at dryness. So that's going to be where your hair follicles aren't producing the necessary amount of sebum to coat your hair and your scalp, which leads to either the perceived feeling of dryness, tightness even, or of course the creation of dandruff, which is the flaking of the skin. The second possibility, of course, of dandruff is that your microbiome is imbalanced, and Malassezia furfur, that specific genus, is essentially creating this dandruff. Oiliness is the opposite end of the spectrum, in which your hair follicle is producing too much sebum, either due to some hormonal imbalance or because you've been overwashing and your body is trying to compensate. And then lastly, cuticle damage. So your hair shaft is either missing cuticles in that fine, tight packing of protection that's in the outer layer of your shaft or your hair shaft, or they're not properly aligned, leading to a decrease in hydrophobicity of the hair and generally weakened strands, leading to breakage or frizz. So with Riman and in collaboration with the Korea Research Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology, our patented Deserticola extract contains 12 times more concentrated loliolide than traditional algal resources. And this loliolide has fantastic benefits for hair follicle rejuvenation and overall scalp and hair health. Alongside Deserticola, we have natural extracts that we grow and produce at our Ask Base plant in Jeju Island, such as camellia seed and nettle, both of which are beautiful for nourishing the scalp and hair, as well as bringing various nutrients to these different parts of our head. So in the 3 products we offer, we have the shampoo is going to be our main cleansing system for cleaning both the scalp and the strands from essentially just your day-to-day life, without stripping any natural oils and still promoting a healthier scalp function. That water treatment is going to be that conditioning treatment to follow the shampoo, in which you are reinforcing damaged cuticles and you're essentially just bringing back a healthier shine to your hair. And it's unique in the sense that it thickens as it interacts with water. And important to note, with both the shampoo and the water treatment, with the nettle extract and with the Deserticola, both these products actually have the ability to improve hair density, which is a huge component of this system. And then, of course, to finish off your hair care routine, you need nothing else other than the Hair Oil Serum, which is a 5-in-1 finishing product for many different benefits. Not only does it provide heat protection if you're wishing to style it, but it reduces frizz, it repairs damage to the cuticles, it enhances your hair volume, and it enhances your hair shine. So that is it for today with hair and Riman, hair physiology and Riman. Of course, how to make a nice juicy outline for you. So this is a thick one. I hope you enjoy it. We're also going to drop the link in the chat here, and I'll pause now just to give a couple people time to scan it. And I'll remind you all that for those who are asking for these various assets, for the PowerPoint, for the recording, these will all be made available at the end of Product University. So after session 8, you will have full reign of all these various, assets. So yeah. So next week, we are going through lightening. Of course, we already went through skincare and Riman, hair care and Riman. Now, of course, we have to look through supplementation and Riman. So how we are prioritizing achieving beauty from the inside out, because beauty, of course, is health, and health is a total body experience. And then, of course, I want to remind you all, there's only 2 more days to submit your questions for our Q&A session, which is session 6 of Product University. And it's actually kind of developed a little bit. So now we are actually going to start out that session with an ask-based review from HQ executives. So this is a really important call. We are going to get directly from the source all this fantastic information that we touched on in week 1. And then, of course, we'll cap it off with a Q&A session featuring the questions you have asked me. So please email ritual@riman.com. Again, the cutoff is March 1st. So I'd love to get your questions and hopefully answer them in the next coming weeks. But that is all for Product University today. I am so appreciative of y'all being here. I always am. Thank you again for listening to me. And I cannot wait to see you next week for session 5. Talk to you later.